165 million square kilometers, 70% of the planet's surface. A single, unified circulatory system. The Panthalassian Ocean was not an ecosystem. It was the ecosystem. Subscribe to the channel. Log your location and local time below. The archive requires a fixed point of observation. The water is a uniform, tepid bath from pole to pole. Shallow epicontinental seas spill across the continental shelves. There are no ice caps, no frozen wastes, only one unbroken body of water, circulating in a slow, predictable gyre. When we analyze the isotopic record from this period, the data is unambiguous. It shows a planet in thermal equilibrium, a planetary heat engine running at peak efficiency. This stability allowed for biological architecture on an industrial scale. The apex predators were not merely large. They were logistical impossibilities in any other system. Creatures like Shonosaurus, an ichthyosaur the size of a submarine, navigated this global ocean. Its fossilized remains are a testament to the system's core mechanic: predictable currents and a globally consistent food web. The critical resource was not territory. It was the uninterrupted flow of thermal energy. The Panthalassian blueprint was simple. It was elegant. It was ruthlessly efficient. And it was a fatal design flaw. When a biological system is this integrated, it becomes a monoculture. Every dominant species is adapted to the same set of stable conditions. Their genetic code is a confirmation of the status quo. They are masters of a world that has no contingency plan for structural change. They hunt. They breed. They are entirely unaware that the very ground beneath the abyss is a temporary contract, a geological imperative that is about to be rendered void. Deep in the mantle, the pressure builds. The supercontinent is straining at its seams. The blueprint is about to be torn in half. How does a 20-meter predator starve in an ocean of calories? The autopsy report is not written in its bones. It is written in hydrodynamics. The upper 100 meters of the Panthalassa are a shimmering engine of photosynthesis, a planetary film of life. Below, a slow, perpetual snowfall of organic matter drifts into the abyss. This is the engine. Simple, predictable, lethally so. The system's efficiency was its defining trait. We call it a food web. It functioned more like a utility grid. The Great Oceanic Gyre was the delivery mechanism, a planetary conveyor belt moving heat and nutrients from the equator toward the poles in a single closed loop. The forensic evidence is in the Paleontology. Ammonite shells from one side of the supercontinent are genetically indistinguishable from those on the other. This wasn't migration. It was systemic distribution. The lack of variation is the key. It tells us the environment was uniform, homogenized. The apex predators were the primary beneficiaries. A hunter like Temnodontosaurus, with eyes the size of dinner plates built for the deep twilight, was a specialist. Its existence was predicated on one absolute rule: the nutrient supply chain would never be interrupted. Its entire physiology was an evolutionary bet that the system was permanent. This perfect distribution network was also a perfect trap. Its stability bred specialists. It punished diversification. When every niche is optimized for the same conditions, the entire biological architecture is exposed to the same systemic risk. The caloric surplus was not a right. It was a temporary subsidy, underwritten by a specific geological arrangement. The first tremor is not felt in the water. It originates in the mantle, miles below the seabed. The foundation of the grid is beginning to crack. Case file: the ichthyosaur metabolic engine. Evidence: a 60-ton body operating at peak aerobic capacity, ruling. A biological machine tethered to a planetary life support system. Subscribe. Mark your time zone in the comments. The case has been open for 200 million years. The surface of the Panthalassa is a shimmering membrane of life. Photosynthetic plankton, the planet's primary lung, exhale oxygen into the upper layers. The ocean breathes. It circulates, it sustains. This was not simply a food-rich environment, it was an oxygen-rich environment. Our forensic analysis of the era's geology and fossil air trapped in amber confirms it. The giants of this ocean, the Shonosaurids and the early pliosaurs, were bound by a strict metabolic mandate. Their colossal size, their powerful muscles, their very ability to function as apex predators required a constant, massive supply of dissolved oxygen. They were high-performance engines. They ran hot. Their existence is proof of a supercharged atmospheric and oceanic system. A cold-blooded animal can survive in low-oxygen water. A sluggish ambush predator can wait for its moment. But a 20-meter pursuit predator burning calories on a colossal scale cannot. It is a biological furnace that must be fed. Food is the fuel. Oxygen is the accelerant. Take away the accelerant, and the fire goes out. The entire predatory hierarchy of the global ocean was balanced on this single chemical variable. These creatures were not dominant because they were strong. They were dominant because the planet's chemistry temporarily subsidized their impossible metabolisms. Their power was borrowed from the system itself. And that system was dependent on one thing above all else: the steady, predictable, uninterrupted circulation of water across the entire face of the globe. A single planetary heartbeat. A heartbeat that was about to become fatally irregular. It was already over. The reign of the pelagic enforcers simply had not received the tectonic notification yet. Before we examine the systemic collapse, subscribe. Your coordinates in the comments become a fixed data point in the archive. Now, observe. The surface is a mirror of blue. Below, the water column is a kingdom of shadows. This was the arena. The apex predators of the Panthalassan era were not monsters. They were a function of the system. We refer to them as pliosaurs and ichthyosaurs. A more accurate title would be regulators. Their job was to enforce the brutal calculus of evolution. The evidence is carved into the fossil record: a fractured vertebra of an ophthalmosaurus, punctured by the conical teeth of a predator 4 times its mass. This was not a battle. It was a culling, a necessary audit to maintain the stability of the entire biological enterprise. Their dominance was the guarantee that the system's energy was not wasted on the weak or the slow. They were the ultimate expression of the ocean's unforgiving efficiency, but their authority was entirely conditional. Their power was derived from the physical reality of a single, unbroken ocean. They were masters of a unified world, specialists whose entire existence was optimized for a game with one set of rules. Their physiology, their hunting strategies, their very genetic code were a testament to a stable world. A world whose foundations were beginning to buckle. The ground beneath the abyss is heating up. The single arena is about to be partitioned. The most powerful organism in the Panthalassa was microscopic. It photosynthesized. It multiplied. It formed a living green film that covered a world. Before we dissect the failure of this biological infrastructure, subscribe. Log your local time in the comments. The archive requires a baseline. The light in the upper ocean is diffused. A greenish haze hangs in the water, thick with single-celled life. This is not an algal bloom. This is the normal state of affairs. We call this foundation phytoplankton. It was the planetary engine of primary production. Every calorie that fueled the 60-ton ichthyosaurs and the colossal pliosaurs was first harvested from sunlight by these organisms. The entire predatory superstructure was built on a substrate of microbial life. The evidence for this matrix is geological. The massive chalk deposits laid down during this era are not rock. They are a graveyard, a compressed tomb of trillions upon trillions of microscopic shells, an autopsy report on a planetary scale. This system was not robust. It was merely stable. The plankton required two things: sunlight from above and a steady supply of nutrients like nitrates and phosphates from below. In the unified Paleontologic ocean, this nutrient cycle was maintained by slow, predictable, globe-spanning currents. The entire food web was calibrated to this steady, metronomic delivery. The apex predators were oblivious. They patrolled a kingdom whose power source was entirely beyond their perception. Their dominance was a lien held against a caloric system they did not understand and could not control. A system this dependent on predictable flow is critically vulnerable to one thing: a barrier. And the Earth's crust was preparing to build one, thousands of kilometers long, 180 million years ago. The heart of the Pangaean supercontinent. The first terminal fracture. Subscribe to the channel. Log your city in current time. A small act of archival defiance before the record closes. A line of fire cuts across the arid interior. Fissures thousands of kilometers long vomit black basalt. The sky is a permanent, toxic twilight of sulfur and ash. This is not an event. It is a geological reorganization. When we examine the mantle dynamics, the mechanism is clear. The supercontinent was a thermal blanket. It trapped the planet's internal heat for 100 million years. A pressure cooker with no release valve. The crust beneath it thinned. It weakened. It finally ruptured. The evidence is in the rock itself. Vast igneous provinces, testament to a bleed out of magma on an inconceivable scale. This was the inciting incident, the beginning of the end for the Paleontologic blueprint. The apex predators, patrolling the global ocean, were completely insulated from this terrestrial violence. They operated under the assumption of a permanent world, a fatal assumption. Their environment was being dismantled from the inside out by forces they could not possibly comprehend. The ground had shifted. The rules were being rewritten in molten rock. The single, unified system was now on a geological clock. The split is no longer a risk. It is a physical reality. The wound in the continent is widening, 1 millimeter at a time. Soon it will reach the sea. What does the death of a global current look like in the geological record? It is not a scar, it is a divergence. A slow, systemic poisoning. Subscribe. Log your location and time. The evidence demands a witness. The water on one side of the nascent rift runs clear and cold. On the other side, it is sluggish, saline, and starved of oxygen. The Great Gyre has been severed. The forensic evidence is not in bone, but in chemistry. When we analyze core samples from the seafloor on either side of the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, the isotopic signatures begin to tell two different stories. For millions of years they were identical. Now they deviate. This is the autopsy of a current. The rising landmasses of the rifting continents were not just a barrier. They were a dam. They blocked the equatorial flow of warm water. The planetary heat pump was broken. This was not a swift death, it was a systemic strangulation. The single, predictable Paleontologic ocean was now gone. In its place were two new systems. One, the Proto-Atlantic, was a narrow, isolated basin, prone to anoxia and extreme salinity. The other, the Proto-Pacific, was now cut off from its equatorial heat source. Its poleward currents began to deliver not warmth, but a deep, spreading chill. The pelagic enforcers were now trapped. They were inmates in two newly formed prisons. Their world had not just shrunk. It had been fundamentally re-engineered into something hostile. One ocean was suffocating. The other was freezing. And the inhabitants of both were running out of time. The apex predator of this new, isolated Atlantic died of suffocation. The fossil record is unambiguous on this point. Before we examine the mechanism, subscribe. Leave your city and time in the comments. Your coordinates matter to the archive. The water of the new Western Basin is warm. It is placid. A layer of black, anoxic sludge carpets the seafloor. This was not a hunt. It was a sentence. The forensic evidence lies in the geological layers known as oceanic anoxic events. These are bands of black, carbon-rich shale found in sediment cores from this time. They are the chemical signature of a dead zone, a basin-wide suffocation. With the global currents broken, the narrow proto-Atlantic became a trap. Its circulation was sluggish, water stratified. The deep ocean was no longer replenished with oxygen from the surface. The phytoplankton matrix bloomed in the warm surface waters, then died, sank, decomposed. This process consumed what little oxygen remained in the depths. For the high-performance ichthyosaurs and pliosaurs, this was a metabolic death sentence. They were air-breathing reptiles, but their prey was not. The entire food web below them collapsed. The foundation rotted out from under them. The caloric grid went dark. A 40-ton predator cannot survive on scraps. The remains we find are not scarred by battle. They are pristine skeletons entombed in black shale. Evidence of a slow, systemic starvation in a sea that had run out of breath. The enforcers of the old world were now just biomass. Their bodies sank into the anoxic tomb they could not escape. They became part of the evidence. They did not suffocate. They were purged by cold and salt. Ice begins to crust the polar sea, a white cancer on a blue world. The vast eastern ocean, the remnant of the Panthalassa, is chilling. While the western basin choked on stagnation, the larger Proto-Pacific faced a different verdict. The forensic analysis of its deep-sea sediments reveals a thermal collapse. With the equatorial current severed, the poles no longer received their subsidy of warm water. They began to freeze. As sea ice formed, it rejected its salt, creating a hypersaline, supercooled brine. This water was denser than anything in the old world. It plunged into the abyss. This was not a current, it was an undertow. A new, vertical circulation that scoured the seafloor with frigid, toxic brine. It was a saline purge, replacing the temperate deep with a sterile, Arctic environment. The entire thermal structure of the ocean was inverted. The great pelagic hunters were now trespassers in their own homes. Their warm water metabolisms, once a huge advantage, became a fatal liability. The cold crippled them. It slowed their reactions. It forced them to burn precious calories just to stay alive. Their prey vanished, unable to cope with the new chemical regime. The hunting grounds became a barren, frozen desert. Their dynasty did not end in a climactic battle. It ended with a slow metabolic seizure in the dark, freezing water. They were casualties of a change in thermodynamics. The old enforcers were gone. One world had become two, and both were now hostile to the life they once sustained. The case file is closed. The Panthalassan Ocean is dead. In its place, two hostile successors. The old dynasty was not overthrown. It was architecturally invalidated. The new Pacific is a vast, cold engine, driven by the thermal shock of the poles. Survival is a brutal equation of calories and insulation. The Atlantic is a warmer, more complex labyrinth of new seas. A chaotic testing ground for evolutionary opportunists. The single, global rulebook was torn in half. Now, life proceeds down two divergent, irreconcilable trajectories. This was the Great Bifurcation. Two evolutionary experiments, running in parallel, quarantined by continents. When we read the final autopsy of this era, the cause of death is systemic. The foundation failed. The planet's crust shifted, and the entire biological operating system it subsidized was rendered obsolete. The great pelagic enforcers were not defeated in combat. They were casualties of a geological reorganization. They were specialists in a world that no longer existed. Their extinction serves as a quiet, clinical reminder that dominance is always conditional. It is a lease granted by the environment, not a title held in perpetuity. This is the ultimate verdict of deep time. Supremacy is temporary. Stability is a statistical anomaly. The systems that create and sustain life are themselves fragile components in a machine of indifferent and inconceivable power. The planet does not build monuments. It only leaves behind evidence.